Welcome into the Coaching Clubhouse with Adrian Last.
Hello, I'm Adrian Last. Thanks for joining me in the Coaching Clubhouse for another conversation about the world of coaching. My guest today sees a welcome return to Yvette Jeal, who first joined me in the Clubhouse in 2024. Definitely worth re-listening to that episode, or if you're a new listener, go back and take a listen to it. It's definitely worth it. Yvette is a professional certified coach and a member of the International Coaching Federation, has over 20 years of commercial experience and partners with leading organizations across the world. She's also a licensed neurotransformational coach, which means she can bring the latest neuroscience-backed coaching techniques to her clients. This is fascinating, Yvette, and I can't wait to get into it. Welcome back, firstly.
Hi, Adrian. Nice to be back.
You okay?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Excellent. So I'm really pleased I've managed to entice you back. So again, thanks for being here today. You were previously on the podcast with some really fascinating stories about your time and your experiences in coaching. So hopefully we can hear more about your experience over the years today. And particularly, we're going to focus today on the subject of neuroscience. And I just want to start with what feels like a bit of a straightforward question. What interested you, firstly, in studying neuroscience? And why do you think it's relevant to coaching today?
Well, that's a good question. I've always been interested in the brain and how it influences our behaviors, our actions, our reactions, our habits, and decision making, all of the stuff that comes into coaching. And so I guess that intrigued me into learning a little bit more about it and going into studying neuroscience. And that opened up like a whole new world. And I would say it's been a real game changer to be able to bring that into coaching. And it sort of gives coaching a scientific backbone, I'd say. And it means that whatever issues clients are bringing along, you're able to be able to give them really specific tools to help them. So whether that's change, stress, innovation, creativity, whatever it might be, you're able to sort of really home in on tools and techniques that are science-backed to help them, which is fantastic.
You talked there about typical sort of issues, and I'm just interested to dig a little bit further into that. What are the typical issues that you see from coaching clients who might bring, those issues along where they might benefit, I guess, from your experience as a neurotransformational coach?
Well, I mean, each client has their own individual things, but there are themes that come up over my many years of coaching. Lots of people come with, the business is going through transformation, restructuring, change. And for example, change can be very hard for the brain. The brain is wired to keep you safe, and change can be difficult. So being able to explain what's going on and work out workarounds of how to do change well is absolutely key in business, as is managing stress. Businesses and leaders want their teams to be working smartly. And, neuroscience is all about good brain management. And with good brain management, you're going to be more effective. Without that, you're going to have impaired functioning and not be working at your optimum. So, we're able to address that in the sessions.
And you mentioned there about kind of organizations, leaders who are looking at their staff, looking at themselves about stress and burnout. These important themes seem to come up more and more in coaching. How does what you say there relate to this?
Well, it's hugely connected. I do a lot of work with clients. This is one of my big passions, actually, trying to get to people before they reach burnout, because businesses have some great people in those businesses, and they need to retain that good talent. But what happens is people are getting to the point of burnout and then leaving. And one of the sessions I run, it's called the Goldilocks of the brain. And it's all about your prefrontal cortex, which sits right behind the eyebrows, which is incredibly sensitive to stress. But what's really fascinating about it is it needs a certain amount of stress, but not too much. And that's why it's called the Goldilocks, because it needs just the right amount of stress and stimulation. And when we have too little or too much, it leads us to the same place, which is foggy thinking, can't retrieve memories, can't achieve our goals, lack of empathy, all the, when people are getting very irritable, everyone's, incompetent, is how, it's because you're stressed. But it's interesting that people do need enough stress as well. So, you might have situations in companies where people are stagnated in a role and they're not actually being challenged enough, and they might need a stretch project, or that somebody is overwhelmed, which we're seeing a lot of, overwhelmed, and there's too many neurotransmitters, flooding the brain, and they're not able to perform at their optimum. So as a leader, you really want to be able to get people working smartly. And that's what the session dives into, how to do that. And that sweet spot where people can operate at their optimum is different for every person.
It's really interesting that, because it feels like as a society, we are more kind of aware of stress and what you were just describing there. And certainly in my role at ITV Studios, over the years, you people bring lots of things to you.
Yeah.
Bob is stressed, he's overwhelmed, there's problems here. And sometimes I find that there's a bit of not confusion, but there's not a clarity around actually, and you said it perfectly there. We all need a certain amount of stress, and we're going to have adrenaline at work because actually we're all busy. We've got deadlines, sometimes we're under pressure. And it does feel like actually that stress is, some of that is okay, because actually it makes us fire, and it makes us enthusiastic, and it makes us want to kind of power on and do what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really interesting that, and that's all about the kind of I guess what you see in terms of neurotransformational coaching and neuroscience.
Well, we need for example, dopamine. Which is for reward. You get more dopamine released in anticipation of something. So we need things to look forward to. We need things to get out of bed for, and we need a certain amount of stimulation. But it's when it tips over, and it's understanding, it's bringing the awareness to each individual, because we're all different, about what we need to put into our day to get that balance. And, that taps into other things like boundaries and pushing back. And, it's all the things that come up in coaching. But ultimately, if we're focusing on what gets us into that place where we're operating really well, and that's where the coaching comes into it, sort of understanding yourself.
It's really interesting. I find it really interesting. And I'm sure our listeners do as well. And I suppose, picking up on the answer to the last question, when we look at ourselves and our habits, it's great, isn't it? The neurotransformational coaching has got some fantastic principles. I'm sure you've seen the success of it and how it plays out. But changing habits is really difficult, particularly if they've been ingrained for a lifetime. How do you sort of get around that, I suppose?
It's so interesting. I mean, maybe people that are listening have heard of, there's a lot out there now around neuroplasticity, which is the brain's potential to rewire itself and grow and change. So, but what's interesting is our brain's sole purpose really is to keep us alive and conserve energy. So it's actually not necessarily wired for change. It tries to keep us safe.
Yeah.
So you've probably heard of like neural pathways, when neurons fire together, they wire together. And when we carve neural pathways, the habits. So if we've been doing something for a really long time and it's been hardwired in, we might, people come to coaching and they say, I want to do this. I want to have more impact in the boardroom. I want to be a storyteller. I want to, do all these things, which means changing behaviors. And they want it, so they have the intention, but then they go away from the coaching session and they'll revert back to the way they've always done it quite often, because the brain will pull them back because they're under pressure, they're busy. And so you have to have attention as well. So it's about intention and attention. So every time you feel yourself going off track, it's like, how do I get back on track? And that's why coaching is so important, because it helps you keep getting back onto that track. until eventually, I mean, I see this happen all the time. I see people make incredible breakthroughs, and it's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's once they've done it enough times, your brain chooses that option. So this is neuroplasticity, and there's also, obviously, I work with people on how to create a state to make neuroplasticity happen quicker and faster and do change well. So it's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'd like to ask you more about that state, but I wonder if that's something that probably is best kept in your coaching sessions.
Well, yeah, there's so much involved in it, but it's what I cover when I run the neuroplasticity sessions. I can't say that. And we sort of look into brain mapping and pathways that maybe are no longer serving you, and what might serve you better. And yeah, it's all in the session.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, one of the interesting things here in what you're saying, Yvette, and I see this in my day job in marketing, is about creativity. And certainly in a marketing role, you've got to have that creativity. And it's certainly one of my passions, but we've all got it inside of us, of course. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier that it can help with accessing more creativity. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, this is really interesting, actually. So the brain is a system, and within that system we have many networks, and two of the major networks are something called task positive mode and default mode network. And up until, I think it was the 1990s, when the first fMRI came out, the MRI for the brain, we believed that activity only went on in the brain when you were doing something. But what fMRI has proved was that there was just as much blood flow to the brain, but a different part of the brain, when you were in wakeful rest. So what neuroscience has discovered is that it's just as important to be able to toggle between these two networks to access different things. So let's just call them task and default mode. So when we're in task mode, this is when we really need to get into task mode to get things done. Sometimes, we're sitting at our desks and we're focusing and we're budgeting and planning and making calls and getting things done. But then we get stuck because we're trying to get creative. We're trying to think of a new idea and get some innovation and inspiration. And that's not the best mode to be able to do that in. You want to be able to drop into the default mode, because when one is on, the other one is dimmed right down.
Yeah.
And so you need to give yourself space. So the best thing is, if you're trying to come up with an idea, is to come away from your desk and go for a walk, or go and make a cup of tea and sit in the garden, or do something that's a low cognitive task that is going to allow you to access the ideas and for things to drop in and make associations. And I run a whole session on this.
Okay.
Really, it's really interesting, because it's basically helping people move from vision to action and action to vision. So we call it crossing the river. And we all know people that are great with ideas but maybe not implementing them, or people that are so good at doing the doing but maybe not accessing enough creativity and new ways of doing things. So being able to tap into these two networks and really work with that is very powerful.
It's so interesting. I honestly, I could talk about this subject for a while, but we do have a limit of time on this podcast. But I'm now, what you're saying now thinking back to COVID times, when we were all kind of stuck indoors, we couldn't really go out that much, and creativity really suffered during that time. I know, again, relating back to the marketing job, a lot of people in my team and in the wider sort of ITV teams were kind of saying, look, it's really hard actually, because a lot of people will always say a lot of creativity comes when I'm out walking. I could be stood on the platform at Victoria Station and suddenly this thing pops into my head.
I worked with lots of people during COVID, supporting them, and the other thing that people were really struggling with was motivation.
Okay. Yeah.
That sort of tapped into that Goldilocks thing we were talking about earlier, because there was no momentum. You weren't jumping out of bed, getting on a train, and just like everything was sort of still, and so all of those things were really lacking. So a friend of mine's an artist, and she says that when she's painting, she's in she'll be in task mode painting and in flow. Task mode is actually when you're meditating, but not, because task mode is all about being here and present, and the other one is about past and the future. But when she gets stuck, she has to turn the painting round and go and clean the bathroom. And she's cleaning the bathroom, and it gives her ideas start to drop in about what she can paint next. So it's really interesting stuff. And I think what's interesting when you're talking about businesses is that a lot of people have been really educated and grown up with the fact that if you're not on all the time, like you're not on green on Teams, and you're not sort of sitting at your desk, that you're not being proactive. But actually, you're going to get far more from getting outside. You know, walk and talk meetings are incredible. I do a lot of outdoor coaching.
Do you? Yeah.
I love taking people outside. You know, get them out of their heads, into their bodies, take in the environment. Just they love it. We get much more creativity from that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And just in terms of, I suppose when you run coaching sessions, if I'm a coaching client and I'm coming to you, do I have to sort of request neurotransformational coaching? Is that a specific session that you do, or that's just weaved into a sort of typical session with you?
So I do run dedicated sessions. So I work with a lot of clients around the world with their teams, especially when they're dotted in different countries. It's a great way to bring the teams together. And I run specific sessions on different topics, like how to manage stress, change, all those kind of things. So that's like team sessions. And I can do the same for individuals, dedicated sessions. Otherwise, if I'm doing a coaching program with someone and, you know, a topic comes up that I can just give them a tool in that moment, I can also do that. I can weave it in as well. So that's kind of how it works.
Great. And finally, Yvette, for people that have got a real taster here of what neurotransformational coaching could do for them, but also for people that want to come to you for coaching or anything else that you offer, how do they find out more about you?
Well, if they contact me via my website, which is www.yvettejeal.co.uk, there's a contact form on there, or they can link in, and they're the best ways to get hold of me.
Great. And I'll put your details in the comments of this podcast and vodcast so people can find it there as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining me today, Yvette. That was absolutely fascinating. And to repeat myself, I could easily sit here for another hour and just explore this fascinating subject. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Adrian. It's been really great to be here. Thank you.
And that's all we've got time for in today's Coaching Clubhouse. A big thanks again to Yvette Jeal for joining me in today's episode. Remember to press subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and press subscribe if you're watching on a podcast service as well. You'll get notifications about future episodes and also access to exclusive content. That's it. Thanks very much for joining. I'll see you very soon.
The Coaching Clubhouse is produced by Adrian Last Coaching. Discover more on the website at adrianlast.co.uk.